We are back. Look at
Mhm.
this beautiful, phenomenal gift to the planet, Miss Debbie Nichols-Garrett, the CEO and founder of For Your Temple and AfriCore, the movement that will teach you how to move your body in sacred art form. And I am now coining her the prophet of the pelvic floor. So thank you to all of you who hopped on our live stream yesterday. We blasted it through all of our social media channels, with the exception of IG. It'll be hitting there too, so that those of you there can get caught up there. But yes, this conversation is important. And if you've ever followed my work, you know that what you see is what you get, that I pour my life experiences into my work. And so I have no apprehension, no shame about my journey with my pelvic floor. And I'm hoping that my commitment to transparency and authenticity allows us to have necessary conversations that can transform our health. So Debbie, we're back. And what did it feel like yesterday? Just kind of being in your passion of talking about pelvic floor health. How did that feel for you?
Thank you, Tama. I felt really energized, and I started to get more messages, because of the fact that, I work from this place, and especially move. I when it comes to movement, and we'll talk about that a little bit today, and the other live stream, just movement from the pelvis, and talking about the pelvis. I just feel and hear so many ideas and whispers and messages, right? Like, we know the womb has a voice. You taught me that so well, and being able to carry that out into my work now is like, oh my gosh. And when she is in being heard, having attention given to her, it's just like, okay, now I'm going to speak more and more, because of the fact that you're hearing me. I'm not being rejected. I'm not being closed off. I'm not being, you know what I mean? So the ideas are flowing, and I just feel like an engine running, because it's like, wow. And I thank you, because the work that I do, usually it's, I know most of my clientele want to be hush hush in the background. Right. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be that person that comes in the front line. But I love the fact to get even more comfortable talking about possible pelvic floor dysfunction, because the reality is pretty much everybody, men and women, all have pelvic floor dysfunction in one degree or another. If you got back pain, you have pelvic floor dysfunction, right? If you got hip pain, you have pelvic floor dysfunction. As we mentioned yesterday, if you're sitting for long periods of time at work or driving or whatever the case may be, you have pelvic floor dysfunction. Extreme athletes, the list goes on and on. So it's just dispelling the shame, getting rid of the shame about it, and understanding the varying degrees of it. So all of that is just, I'm vibrating, and I really, I'm amplified. I feel really good about it. So, thank you for reaching out and partnering, and just kind of taking this message global in the expression that we do it in.
Yeah, I have two intentions through partnering with you to offer this information. One, obviously, is to support you in your gift. Like, I remember the days when getting in front of the camera and sharing your gifts was shy for you. So it's incredible for me to witness you in a fuller expression of who you are. But secondly, when I was researching information about pelvic floor health, I didn't always find teachers who look like me. Not that I can't learn from anyone else. I, run an international business, and I intersect with women from all ethnicities. But it means something to me, especially on this International Women's Day, to see the variety and the diversity of information, because our life experiences, like I said earlier, really do pour into our teachings. And so it's good to see more women of color, melanated women, talking about the pelvic floor and the importance of pelvic floor health. So let's get into it. I don't want to assume that our listeners who are catching these streams understand what the pelvic floor is anatomically. Can
Right.
you just give us a quick overview of like when we talk about the pelvic floor, we're talking about this part of the body. What is
Right.
the part of the body that describes the pelvic floor?
Well, the pelvic floor itself are a group of muscles that create, like I would like to say, a trampoline. And so I used this image yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is the front of our pelvis. So right now, I'm assuming that you're sitting on a chair and I'm sitting on a chair. And these are those hard sit bones underneath here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm just going to turn it up here. And then you can see, and this is the same for men and women, right? With the exception of the vulva being different on womb carriers, right? And so between the sit bones, and I'll just take this off, you can see what this is a really beautiful, intricate set of muscles. And if I go in here, if you look in the pelvis, see back here is the tailbone. And many of us have fallen and hit our tailbone, right? But as you can see, there's an intricate amount of muscle tissue that attaches there. That is the pelvic floor. It's like a tent, right? To support you. And ultimately, the pelvic floor muscles is what we call the base or the foundation of our core muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So people talk about the core in the fitness industry, and it's used so loosely, and we're always thinking crunches, crunches, core to get your core,
Right.
but it's more of an intricate unit. And there's so many different nuances, and it's basically there for stabilization. The pelvic floor is there for stabilization. So what lines sometimes gets blurry is when we're talking about keeping our vagina tight. Ultimately, it's the pelvic floor muscle tone that helps to support the vaginal canal and keep it tight. What we don't want is necessarily tight, as we mentioned yesterday, because we don't want rigidity.
Yeah. And I just love the underlying message of that because I'm in my soft era. That's
Yes.
what I'm calling it. I'm in my soft era. Girl. Everybody do this. I'm
I'm
just
with you. Come
soft.
on.
I'm just soft. I'm just easy. My
Mm,
life will not be rigid. My life and my legend and my legacy
yeah.
will not be built upon struggle and
Right.
adversity. I
Right.
literally did a post on my Facebook this morning saying, let's address survivor's guilt. You've survived so much, but can we take off that hat of surviving? And can we actually get into thriving? Can we let go of the narratives, the values, and the principles that directly have an impact on the anatomy of your pelvic floor and whether or not it's able to hold things with ease or if it's struggling because your consciousness is rooted in struggle ideology. So I really, really, really resonate with the myth busting that I think needs to occur about our bodies.
Right. Right.
And in our work, Debbie, especially, for me, pioneering in this industry of yoni steaming and all of that, I hear ridiculous things, right? Because our industry is young
Yes.
and it became popular and trendy before there was an industry standard and before people really knew how to read the medical case studies
Yeah.
that exist about the work we do. So I see people say, yoni steaming will tighten your vagina and yoni steaming will help with your pelvic floor. And you need to get yoni eggs and pearls. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, and maybe this is your first intersection with me, I believe in leaving the vagina alone. There are certain things we do, yes. But when it comes to putting stuff in your vagina, leaving it there for days, I personally
Right.
have not found data
Right.
that supports the claims.
Right.
Can we have that conversation about what we're seeing as trends amongst women who I understand the intention? We want to reclaim our bodies from the medical system. We want to reclaim our process of healing and not being told what to do with our own temples. However, I do think knowledge is very powerful, and that we cannot negate the structure of our body, right? I make no claims that yoni steaming is going to transform your pelvic floor. Like, I understand anatomy, right? So let's talk about some of the things you're seeing too, Debbie, and what should we really align with and what shouldn't we?
Well, I love that. So let's talk about steaming first. And I ironically enough was going to do a post about facial steaming and how it can change the skin and the how the circulation of the blood can really flush your skin and make everything vibrant and more illuminated. That being said, when we steam the vagina, we are obviously creating circulation to the area. So the blood vessels, or what they call vasodilation, makes the tissue fuller. So in actuality, yes, you are increasing volume and increasing tone tone to the pelvic floor, to the vaginal canal. So you'll notice that depending on how you're assessing or how you're engaging with your vaginal canal, with your vagina, yoni, however you want to call her gloriously, you'll notice that there's going to be increased tone depending on what's happening. Right. So, for example, if you have, if you were doing a series of steams before your moon time, right, leading up to your moon time, if in fact you're using a cup, a diva cup, you'll notice that the diva cup would probably be a little bit more snug if you were being consistent with your practice leading up to that. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. What you're saying is, to make sure our listeners are clear, you absolutely, through womb sauna steaming, you can tonify, strengthen the muscle group specific to your yoni.
Right.
What people need to be clear on, though, is the anatomy of the pelvic floor. There's different muscle groups.
Well, different muscle groups, right.
And I want to hear your perspective. I think it's our microwave mentality culturally that makes us want one quick resolution for everything. Right? Yes. So what we're teaching you in this quick conversation and what you're going to learn in our class about the drop that's not hot. All right. He was jamming yesterday. So listen, what you're going to learn is we teach mind, body, spirit. We're talking about a lifestyle change. Yes, you can steam with Debbie. Yes, you can come to the headquarters steam. You can steam with any of my practitioners and get health benefits. But our method of serving you and holding space for you has to show up in your everyday life.
100%.
So you should, like, I love you use the example of the facial steaming. Yeah, I can steam my face and get all this blood circulation. But if I don't drink enough water,
that part.
Okay.
The desert.
So if I'm not eating hydrating foods, let's agree in this conversation to stop looking for shortcuts.
That's right. Right.
Let's really embody the things that can transform our lives and hold value. So Debbie, do things like the yoni eggs, the crystal wands, or I've seen on Amazon the pelvic floor wands. My pelvic floor therapist said she thought it could add value in between our sessions because it goes inside, like you were holding up the display of the pelvis, and it's like trigger point therapy.
Yes.
Inside those points, and that's why the wand moves and all of that. So she was saying that could help.
Right.
But help us understand why people would even make the claim that, the weightlifting stuff, the Kegel balls and all that kind of stuff could be beneficial to the pelvic floor.
So, and that's interesting because I love what you said with respect to the microwave mentality. Each tool is for a different purpose, and your toolbox is going to be different from mine. So we've got
our pelvic floors are different, right?
Correct. Because of the fact that I don't know how often you're sitting. I don't know, you understand what I'm saying? I've had a plethora of dance injuries, all these kind of things that will attach to these kind of conditions. So I'm going to start with the wand. First of all, when you think of going to a massage therapist, and I've been a registered massage therapist up here in Canada for over 20 years, and you've got your shoulders, you've got pain that goes into your head. There is, as you said, there are trigger points in your shoulder. So you need to be able to work out the trigger points, stretch out the muscle in order to create function, because the trigger points are hyperactive muscle fibers or overactive muscle fibers that clump up and cause maybe a pain referral pattern or dysfunction. When we understand that the pelvic floor muscles support stability, and I like to say the pelvic floor, you said you're from Biloxi, Mississippi, but
But I grew up in Maryland.
okay, you grew up in Maryland, but there's something about New York. Tell me, you're New York.
Oh, my mom's family, my grandmother, my matriarchal lineage. Yeah, we're upstate.
Right. So you've been to New York often.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to consider the pelvic floor, and I'll use an American terminology, is like Grand Central Station.
Okay.
Right? It is the major area. It is the primary area for weight distribution from the right side of your body to the left, from the upper side of your body to. So when we have to transfer weight through this area. So if our shoulders, which are not weight-bearing structures, have a tremendous amount of trigger points, definitely our pelvis will. Do you understand
That
what I'm
makes
saying?
so much sense, because I hold a lot of my tension right in here.
Right.
So, when I go to my massage therapy sessions, I let those Asian women grab them bars on the ceiling and put their feet right up in there and get them knots in.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when I come from my pelvic floor therapy, I don't have as much tension in this area. I just love body wisdom.
Right.
So that's so interesting.
Because it creates alignment. So going back to your question with respect to the wand, it is, I endorse specifically the wand in order to do internal work, because as you can see, it is very difficult. I wouldn't be able externally, even on myself, to massage through my abdomen to get through the muscles here. Now, we can do some work under here externally, but then you have internal work where the wand can come into play, again, depending on what your condition is. And again, we look at the biopsychosocial approach. You've got physical trigger points, and they may hurt, and you press the inside with the wand, but also you breathe into that area. And then all of a sudden, things start to flood back into your memory about a situation that may have happened that could have traumatized you. Right. And then you'll start to get messages. So there's so much that could be said, but that is not for everyone. You may need, well, in a lot of pelvic floor therapy world, they, when it comes to physical therapists, they may recommend things like Benoit balls or that sort of thing. So in that regard, yoni eggs can be useful, but not for everybody. If the majority of people tend to be really tight, we don't want, with the microwave mentality, just continue to start using yoni eggs to tighten something that's already tightened.
Right.
Or rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because of the fact that we're noticing weakness, we automatically think we're loose. That's not necessarily the case. Right? So the yoni eggs are wonderful for awareness, strengthening, dexterity, if in fact that is what your body calls for. But it's not a one size fits all thing.
So how does somebody understand what their body, their pelvic floor is asking for? Is that something that they need to pair with somebody who specializes in that and get some diagnostic work done? Or are there clues that the pelvic floor will give a woman to let her know if she's too tight, if she's, on the weaker side and needs tightening and toning?
Right. So ultimately, the clues, they're definitely clues. And I mean, and everybody has different approaches to their wellness, right? So some people will go outside and get diagnostic assessment, which is not a problem at all. But then other women want to go inside and tap in for themselves first before they seek any assistance. So what I would say is a major indication that you may be overly tight would be due to pain. Sometimes you may get shooting pain in your hip, even in your labia, around the rectum, whatever the case may be, especially if you are trying to do some kind of pelvic floor contraction. And it may be a little bit too painful, and that could be an indication now that you may need to release a little bit. Even in intimate settings, if in fact you are engaging in intercourse and you may feel that you're ready, but you, upon penetration, it's just too much pain and there's just a lot of rigidity there. Of course, there's a lot of anatomical names for it, but for the purposes of this conversation, that may mean that you have a lot of spasming. It could be from an emotional place. It could be from a physical disability, or sorry, not disability, for a physical condition that needs to be addressed. And it could be just spasming of anywhere around that attaches to the pelvic floor, from a scar, from hamstring issues. It could be a whole plethora of situations, right? When we're talking about the loose side, and again, it is all incumbent of the individual, their whole entire package, assessment-wise, what their body is saying, going into activities. But if you're feeling heaviness, a little bit of heaviness, like underneath the belly button or around the womb space, it's almost like there's more of a bearing down. That could mean that there might be a bladder or a uterine prolapse, and that could definitely call for some strengthening. But even when we do strengthening, it's still important to stretch out and work out tight or hypertonic muscles or anywhere that has adhesions first. So even if in fact you may need to do more of a strengthening protocol, it's still important that we still open up and stretch out and lengthen those muscles, because these are skeletal muscles. The pelvic floor muscles are muscles of the skeleton, right? They're not like cardiac muscles, so involuntary muscles that kind of work on its own. They are skeletal muscles, so it's all about biomechanics and wear and tear for the most part. When you're approaching them in that regard. So those are two kind of different instances. Now, people would say, what about when I go to the washroom and I'm going to pee, or I'm going to eliminate, like defecate? Two things could be happening. You guys either be very, very hypertonic, or very, very hypo, meaning your tissue may be loose. It is all depending on how your muscles are grabbing and coordinating. There's a coordination that happens all the time. And I just make reference to tremendous athletes and dancers that I know, that they would, turn around and do a split in the air. Like, you would think that they can lift yoni eggs through their vagina and over a house and stuff like that. And that's fine, but they still would leak. Why? It's not because they're weak, but the muscle coordination is off, from the stomach muscles and the internal pressure to the pelvic floor at the point of impact. So it's a lot. Do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, I love when you're saying microwave.
I love what you're saying, because one of the best gifts I've ever given to myself is to be supported.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're giving all this, because I'm sure some of the listeners are like, what was that word she just said? And hold on, like, how do I write that down? But listen, I don't want to be the guru of everything.
Right.
I just want to be so in tune with myself that when I recognize I'm in need of something, I know how to source it properly.
Right.
So I'm listening to you like, yeah, there's a part of me, because I'm a nerd and I would love to understand all the terminology, but then I relaxed right into receiving mode, which is the signature of the divine feminine, by the way, and said, I'm so glad I have a therapist who knows all of this.
Right.
So that I can just drop into receiving mode and get the care that I need.
Right.
Hence why we're doing this class. Like, you don't have to know it all. You don't have to hold any guilt or shame because you don't know. Like, that urinary incontinence was a journey for me. Like, I really was like, all this wound work I've done in my life, and you mean to tell me I can't hold my pee? And it really bothered me. It really bothered me because I'm a powerful woman. I can manifest thousands of dollars in a day, but I can't squeeze the right muscles to keep myself from pissing on myself. You know, so it was a journey. It bothered me. And through my experience in building a relationship with my pelvic floor and getting nourished and
Yeah.
supported, my therapist told me, she said, you know, Tama, it's not really that your muscles are weak, it's that what's triggering weakness in your muscles is stress. You have stress incontinence. She said, she gave me a worksheet. She said, I want you to start journaling every time you have to urinate. And I want you to pay attention to what's happening when it's time to go. When you get the first sensation that I need to go to the bathroom, right? Then start recording like what's happened. And it was so enlightening for me. It absolutely was stress related because I have a busy world. I'm from one thing to the next. My body gives me signals. I ignore them. I got a little bit more time. And then next thing I know, I got to go, you know? But even in the pelvic floor therapy, when she was going in and hitting trigger points, when you were talking about how certain things, certain points release information, there were times in my pelvic floor therapy sessions that those muscles were holding memories I didn't know they were still holding. My mind had advanced.
Yes.
But when she triggered certain points, I could see the memories,
Yes,
the emotions, and I
yes,
was able to process them because I have tools for that too, right?
yes.
So I really appreciate what you're saying as women who are listening to this, as you're trying to figure out what you want to do to start building your relationship with your pelvic floor and what tools. I invite you to support yourself and not try to figure it out alone. Take the class and get the introduction to your pelvic floor health. Let Debbie's wisdom really support you because you don't have to waste time scrolling through the internet trying to figure out, you know, because you're not even gonna know half of these terms Debbie just dropped.
And it is a rabbit hole. It is a rabbit hole. And I just wanted to touch on, and I'm sure you've heard this term, but as a massage therapist, they always taught us the issues are in the tissues. I'm sure you've heard that term. Right. And so that's exactly what you're speaking of. And many spaces might not even support and honor that. But that is really, really important, as well as I'm sure every person that is on this call can identify with the fact as soon as they come into the door and they see the washroom, all of a sudden they have to go. It's just like as soon as they're like, oh, I gotta go.
I'm like, how did my bladder know I was home? Like, how did you know?
But then if you have that same experience, and just like your pelvic floor therapist said, journal, it's just like when you see the washroom and all of a sudden you say, I'm okay, I don't have to pee, I'm okay, I don't. It's like, oh my gosh, that really works. So that feedback loop from mind, your body, and of course your spirit, all those things need to come in alignment. As Tama was saying, yes, this is the introduction, but it's also to, just give you a little bit more empowerment and in awareness of what you may think you're going through by yourself, and that's not the case. It's so not the case, right?
It felt so good to talk to my best friends, my sisters, and realize that everybody was having similar experiences. And that's the power of what happens when we have necessary conversations. It's very important. So the last thing I want to say in this conversation that I would love to hear you give your perspective on is, how do we vet the proper support? We just told people, okay, you might need a pelvic floor therapist. I know that we have a global audience, so it's going to be different in every country, but I tell my clients to check with their insurance. If their insurance does not cover it, I know what my insurance did was, because they didn't have a pelvic floor therapist in their network, just had my pelvic floor therapist fill out a quick form, and then they covered it and they pay her 100%, right? So those are options. Don't think that you can't get a referral from your primary care doctor and say, hey, I need some support. This is what I'm experiencing. This is part of the value of modern medicine. I don't think they're good with healing. the diseases, but they are good with diagnosing them.
Mm-hmm.
They have the
Mm-hmm.
technology and the labs to tell you exactly what you're dealing with.
Right, 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 right.
That takes out the guesswork
Mm-hmm.
of, is it this, is it that? And let's not waste any more energy on things that we can resolve with ease. So Debbie, how should they vet? What are some of the skill sets and things they should look for to make sure they have a really good person supporting them with their pelvic floor health?
Well, I think number one, transparency is really important, right? In the sense that um, you can ask what specifically do they specialize. So, for example, myself, I specialize with movement quality, right? I'm not necessarily in an office and working and doing a lot of internal work, because I personally don't do internal work, even though the knowledge is there. But yes, you're looking for someone that is holistically has a knowledge base of all things feminine, if in fact that's the case. And let's not negate the fact that men do have pelvic floor dysfunction too.
Yes, I love
Right,
that.
that's very, very important, right?
Mhm.
Just in this space, because of the fact that we're talking in this context, it's really important that I think that therapists should have a holistic or a global understanding of how one's cultural expression can benefit. And by that, I mean, I came to this work because I was doing Pilates training and conditioning. And we were doing a lot of the work on the pelvic floor because of some injuries that I had as well, me having a son. Um, and I realized that they were doing a lot of work with the pelvis and moving it and isolating. And me being a woman of Caribbean descent, I was like, well, we do that. We move our pelvis like that when we're cooking. Like we move our pelvis like in our sleep. Like when we're talking to somebody, our pelvis is just going because it's part of our cultural expression. So when you have a practitioner in front of you that is not necessarily honoring um, your holistic experience for yourself, Tama, as a beautiful Black woman coming from a specific area and your cultural expression. If those things aren't integrated, how can an optimal home care plan or self-care plan be itemized for you, as opposed to saying, well, why don't you do this and why you do this? What if you're a person that can't can't move in a certain type of
Yeah.
you understand what I'm saying? It's really challenging for me to kind of get the words in at this moment. But
No,
I,
but I hear you. If I hear you correctly, depending on your cultural orientation, you may need somebody that understands your day-to-day world
that's right.
so
The
that you
nuances
don't
are.
feel like it's heavy for you to implement
Thank you.
the remedies that they're offering to you. You're like, I do this movement in the kitchen. If you had just told me, girl, when you cook and turn on that mute, but you wouldn't know, if you're not familiar with how I truly live. I cannot have anybody on my self-care team who does not take the time to get to know Tama.
This is it. This is it. That's it.
Like,
That's
you're too busy and your client load is too full to actually take time to understand who I am as a person,
right.
not just what you see in my chart.
Right.
We're not a good fit.
That's right. That's
We're
right.
not a
Right.
good fit.
And the other thing that I find really interesting, let's not negate, it's really important to find somebody, of course, with credentials, but let's not lose sight of the wisdom of either the elders or just the wisdom within our cultural expression. So for example, you will see all over the African continent or the Caribbean, people squatting when they're cooking, when they're cleaning. Squatting is considered from the Western gaze something that's very primitive. Now, it's changing, but we know squatting is the most beneficial thing, for example, for your low back and in particular your pelvic floor, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing to, and I'm not saying that everybody can necessarily do that, but what I'm saying is those cultural nuances and expressions are things, especially again, like moving your waist. These are all things that are implemented in a modern day physiotherapy when it comes to pelvic floor best practices, but in different in different iterations of it. So let's not negate the wisdom of our cultural nuances when we're looking for that. And we want to find practitioners that honor that, celebrate that within ourselves moving forward, as opposed
Oh,
to,
I
you
love
know,
that.
this is the only way we could do it and we're just rigid. And I think my pelvic floor is working, but I just
Yeah,
feel so
and that's the exact opposite. That's the vibration. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to accomplish in the pelvic floor.
right, right.
What are some of the credentials they should look for? Like, are there certain acronyms or things that they should look
Well,
for?
so PT, I think that would be across the board because again, I'm from Canada and you're from the US. So physical therapist, you don't necessarily have to be a physical therapist, but if in fact you are looking at getting certification, there are many certifications with acclaimed physical therapists that have their own accreditations, right? So for example, I did my accreditation with Isa Herrera from Pelvic Pain Relief, and she is a world-renowned pelvic floor therapist. And of course, it's only one of hers. So her gift, she's just offered out for the medical stream professionals that do tremendous amount of internal work, or individuals like myself who are healthcare professionals, doulas, massage therapists that work with women, so we can identify have the capacity to do internal work, but we won't, and that sort of thing. So there are many, I would say, physiotherapists as well as osteopaths that may have specialization, and chiropractors that could have specialization in pelvic floor work, but also Pilates therapists, Pilates instructors, dancers who have been steeped into that work, right? So those are a few places that you can look, not necessarily only from a physiotherapy stream, and not obviously not from gynecology per se, right?
I love this.
Yeah.
It took me a while to find um my pelvic floor therapist. I had been searching for months for somebody in my area. And then
Mhm.
my mama wanted to go to Walmart. And I said, okay, I'm gonna sit in the car and do some car meditation while you're shopping. And I looked at my mother, I said, today is the day that I will summon to myself
Come on.
perfect therapist. And I really live like that. Like, I live this magical life. I'm very clear on what is the vibration that's needed to get what I want.
Wow.
And so I literally sat in my car. I took a few deep breaths, pulled up Google, did a quick search for any physical therapist near me. And I wasn't in my typical neighborhood either. So it's
Right.
interesting. Sometimes you have to go where it's unfamiliar to get what you need. So I did a quick Google search, and voila, found her, took my insurance, everything. Appointment was scheduled within 5 minutes, right?
Wow.
So even if you get frustrated in the process of setting up your self-care team and adding a pelvic floor therapist,
Mhm.
everything is energy.
Mhm.
Everything
Mhm.
is energy. So
Mhm.
you can get in your vortex and you can ground your energy and feel the joy of receiving it with
Yeah.
ease. It appears.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to offer that for anybody that's like, well, I've been looking for it. I know that feeling, and I also know what it feels like to get what you need.
Yeah.
So I invite you. We have one more conversation we're going to have with you. We're giving you just enough to really start thinking about, what do I really know about my pelvic floor? What are the gaps in my knowledge?
Right.
And is it time for me to sign up for this class? The
Mhm.
course materials will be available March 14th. When you register and invest your $49, you get lifetime access. So you can replay the teaching as often as you need. And then you get to plug into the womb of the marketplace. And so my charge and assignment as the womb of the marketplace is to be fruitful and multiply. And so Debbie has all kinds of programs resources, tools that she can provide in person, virtually. She is a mogul in her own lane, doing her positive impact. And so, for those of you who take her course at the Womb Sauna University, you will also have an opportunity to continue the work. And she will support you with some of the tools and resources and programs that she has. And so, when the light is green, you should do what? Go. A made up mind is a force to reckon with.
Wow.
And I don't take a long time to say yes if I see doors flying off the hinges in my life. If I know I have been trying to resolve something, I've been trying to correct something in my life or learn more about my body, I don't take a long time to say yes when it's laid at my feet. I say, thank you. Yes. What I got to do? You go to the comment section and you click the link and you
Right.
register. And you can
Right.
register now. The registration is open for enrollment.
Mhm.
Once you register, the course materials will go live on the 14th. And then you can take it whenever you want. This is a 24/7 on-demand class. So it will fit in your world, right? It doesn't have to be heavy to get what you need. All right. So namaste. The God in me always enjoys communing with the gods that you are. And I hope you also heard something in this chat today that you didn't know. Debbie, thank you for just bringing your light and your wisdom and your knowledge. And we have one more conversation we're going to bring to you in preparation for the launch of this class.